At first glance, it looked perfect. Too perfect. A pot hung neatly above a cold fire ring. A sleeping bag unrolled precisely beside a folded fleece. The backpack stood upright, straps clipped, as if it had just been placed there. Food was stored in a sealed, bear-proof canister, untouched. Nothing looked out of place. Nothing looked rushed. Nothing looked wrong. Except for one thing. There was no one there. 34-year-old Nathaniel Carter, a solo mountaineer from Colorado, vanished somewhere in the Alaskan tundra, not far from Denali's glacial ridges. He left behind a campsite so orderly it looked staged, like a photo for a wilderness gear catalog. No signs of distress, no calls, no pings, no tracks, just an absence that didn't make sense. He had only been off-grid for a day. He missed a scheduled check-in with park rangers. Then he missed a call with his parents. Messages went unread. By the second day, a search had already begun. What they found was silence. This wasn't a case of bad weather. There was no sudden storm, no snow to wipe out evidence, no animal prints. The GPS tracker he always carried had been turned off, manually, not jammed, not damaged, just powered down. It was as if someone hit pause on reality and then deleted him from it. What happened to Nathaniel Carter remains one of the most haunting disappearances in Denali's recent history. Not just because of how little was found, but because of how much should have been. He was experienced, prepared, trained for this. His story is not just about someone who vanished, it's about someone who vanished while everything else remained exactly where it should be. In this investigation, we'll trace the final steps of a man who should have made it home. We'll examine why his disappearance doesn't follow any normal patterns, and we'll try to understand how, in a landscape so wide open, a human being can simply cease to exist. Nathaniel James Carter was born on April 3, 1989, in Boulder, Colorado. He grew up just outside the city in a modest home surrounded by foothills and pine. His father, Robert Carter, worked as a mechanical engineer. His mother, Denise, taught literature at a local high school. From the beginning, Nathaniel's world was shaped by two opposing forces: structure and exploration. As a child, he was drawn to maps. His bedroom walls were covered in National Geographic pullouts and laminated trail charts of the Rockies. At 6, he could point to Yosemite, Banff, and Denali before he could tie his hiking boots properly. While other kids played video games, Nathaniel learned how to read a compass. His first real overnight trek came at 11, a 14-mile loop through Roosevelt National Forest with his dad. He barely spoke the whole time, just watched the ridgelines, memorizing the terrain. He attended Fairview High School and graduated with honors, eventually earning a degree in environmental science from the University of Colorado Boulder. But it wasn't the academics that defined him. It was the weekends. While his peers hit college bars and tailgates, Nathaniel drove north to trailheads, often alone. He spent his downtime navigating switchbacks, photographing lichens on rock faces, and testing new ultralight gear. By his late 20s, Carter was well known in local mountaineering circles. Not famous, not online famous at least, but respected. He wasn't a content creator. He didn't document everything. His Instagram, @CarterTracks, was quiet. Photos of storm clouds above valleys, his boot prints in frost, annotated notes about animal behavior in the captions. No selfies, no filters, just a minimalist record of places he considered sacred. He held a full-time job at the Denver Botanical Survey, where he managed a remote sensing team monitoring alpine plant loss. It paid the bills and funded his real love, wilderness time. He rarely took vacations, instead stacking PTO for extended backcountry solo trips. Friends describe him as thoughtful, slightly obsessive, and incredibly methodical. He packed with military precision, logged every hike in waterproof notebooks, and often scouted routes 6 months ahead. If anyone was overprepared, it was Nate, said one former climbing partner. He planned his water stops to the leader. He once mailed resupply packs to himself at a ranger station 2 weeks in advance. But for all his control, there was a romantic side. He loved Jack London stories and Appalachian folk music. He played harmonica quietly at camp. He once wrote a letter to his sister from Glacier National Park that ended with, "If I ever vanish out here, just know it was the closest thing I've found to peace." At the time, they'd laughed it off. Now, she says, that sentence hits like a punch. Family ties were strong. Nathaniel was the middle of 3 kids. He remained close with his younger sister Leah, who lives in Portland and works in nonprofit housing, and his older brother Dan, a firefighter in Colorado Springs. Every Sunday, no matter where he was, Nathaniel would send a message to their shared group chat, usually just a photo, a trail name, and a thumbs-up emoji. It was his way of saying, "I'm alive, still here." He had no spouse, no children. A long-term relationship had ended 2 years earlier, largely due to the solitude his lifestyle demanded. He wasn't reclusive, but he wasn't wired for conventional routines either. The wilderness was his partner, Leah says. Not in a dramatic way, it was just where he felt most himself. He was also cautious, painfully so. He double-checked gear, took courses in backcountry survival, avalanche safety, and emergency medicine. He carried a Garmin InReach Mini, usually kept clipped to the left shoulder strap of his pack. It was always on. Until this trip. That's part of what makes his disappearance so hard to accept. Nathaniel wasn't reckless. He didn't take shortcuts. He respected the mountains and understood what they could do. If anything, he planned for every possible failure, except the one that took him. Nathaniel Carter had been planning his solo trip to Denali's backcountry for almost 7 months. According to his field notes, saved itineraries, and interviews with friends, it was meant to be his longest and most remote excursion yet. 10 days through seldom-traveled terrain between the Toklat River and the north side of the Polychrome Mountains, skirting an old glacial valley near Cathedral Mountain. No designated trails, no ranger stations, just coordinates, elevation lines, and his own boots. He called it the Silence Corridor, a term he used in handwritten maps he kept folded inside a waterproof folder. The name wasn't official, it was his. Nathaniel's plan was precise. He'd start from the Toklat River Rest Area at mile 53 on Denali Park Road, taking a prearranged drop-off from a seasonal shuttle. From there, he would cross a ridgeline west of Thoroughfare Pass and continue along a northbound route. The path would keep him at higher elevations to avoid muskeg and unpredictable river crossings. He'd mapped key waypoints in detail, including rock formations visible from satellite imagery and input backup paths in his GPS unit. His endpoint, a gravel pullout near mile 66 of Denali Park Road, where he was due to be picked up by shuttle on October 2nd at 3:00 p.m. He notified park rangers of his entry plan through the backcountry permit system, logging an itinerary under permit number 24DN4468. He was assigned Unit 34, a non-trailed zone with very low foot traffic, mostly visited by scientific researchers. He also submitted an emergency contact protocol with his sister Leah listed as primary. According to park records, his route was marked as green level complexity, challenging terrain but within his documented skill set. Gear lists were found inside his vehicle, a silver 2013 Subaru Forester parked at the Wilderness Access Center. His packing was meticulous. REI quarter dome, 1 tent. Feathered Friends 20° F down sleeping bag. Jet boil stove with fuel canisters. Bear canister with freeze-dried meals. Katadyn water filter. MSR snow stakes. Garmin GPS Map 66i. Garmin InReach Mini 2 satellite communicator, Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, paper maps, USGS quadrangle 6369 North, solar charger, emergency whistle, Mylar blanket, first aid kit, 2 notebooks and a zebra pen, ice axe, micro spikes, and collapsible trekking poles. Every piece of gear was logged, dated, and weighed. He left backup gear and detailed route plans with a friend in Anchorage, a botanist he'd met during a glacier-based survey in 2019. That friend, Clara Jensen, confirmed that Nathaniel had checked in with her via text on the evening of September 24th, saying simply, In signal weak, moving light tomorrow. That was the last known message anyone received from him. His Instagram remained dormant. His Garmin satellite device, which usually pinged Leah's email with a location every 24 hours, sent nothing. When she texted his InReach on September 26th, the message showed as undelivered. She waited one more day before calling the park's visitor center. They referred her to the backcountry office, where the staff confirmed that his pickup shuttle was still scheduled for October 2nd. But on October 2nd, Nathaniel wasn't at the pickup point. The shuttle driver, a 17-year veteran of Denali Transit, reported to rangers that he waited 45 minutes, then walked about 300 yards down a game trail near the Mile 66 pullover, calling out for anyone. He saw nothing. No gear. No human presence. He noted that visibility was good, high overcast with mild wind around 40 degrees. No signs of weather-related delay. Rangers began calling his phone. No signal. They tried a forced ping through AT&T's emergency relay. Nothing. Garmin was contacted to attempt a last location fix. The device had not transmitted since entering the park, either turned off or intentionally placed in airplane mode. It was a detail that immediately raised eyebrows. Nathaniel never went off the grid like that, not without reason. His safety protocols were rigid. Even in prior remote hikes through the Uintas and Sierra Nevada, he had never once failed to check in, even if only with a preset OK message. Further anomalies came to light when rangers visited the Tuglat shuttle log. The driver who dropped Nathaniel off remembered him vividly. Quiet guy, full pack, asked about wolf activity, he said. Didn't talk much. But before he got off, he looked at the ridge and said, "This is the place I've been thinking about." In the shuttle footage, Nathaniel can be seen stepping off the bus at 9:14 a.m. on September 25th. He adjusts his shoulder straps, gives a brief wave to the driver, then walks east, disappearing behind the first rise. That footage was later pulled from the vehicle's dash cam and archived in the park's investigative file. He was alone. No other hikers entered Unit 34 that week. By all available evidence, Nathaniel Carter walked into the high tundra with full gear, a mapped-out plan, backup contacts, and 10 years of experience behind him. And then something happened that he hadn't planned for. October 2nd, 2023, the scheduled pickup day. By 3:00 p.m., the shuttle driver waited at the Mile 66 pullover spot where Nathaniel was supposed to appear. He arrived 10 minutes early, per procedure, and stayed for nearly an hour. The weather was stable, high clouds, light wind, visibility stretching nearly 5 miles across the rolling tundra. Nothing suggested delay. No recent snowfall, no flooding, no animal warnings. But there was no sign of Carter. The driver radioed the Tuglat Ranger Station and noted the absence. It wasn't immediately treated as an emergency. Delays happen. Sometimes hikers double back to another access point or miscalculate distance. But when the 5:00 p.m. shuttle returned from the same route and also found nothing, the Rangers flagged it for review. Back in Colorado, Nathaniel's sister Leah had been growing anxious. She hadn't received a check-in in over 7 days. That was rare. Not impossible, but rare. The InReach Mini hadn't transmitted its usual ping received message since the morning of September 25th. By 7:00 p.m. Alaska time, she called the Denali National Park backcountry office. The ranger on duty took her concerns seriously and noted that her brother had not shown up at his scheduled pickup. That night, an internal alert was issued through the park's missing hiker protocol system, triggering Phase 1 status, verify location, initiate non-intrusive checks, and attempt direct contact via listed numbers. Nathaniel's phone went straight to voicemail. His Garmin InReach remained unresponsive. Rangers placed an immediate request with Garmin's emergency access team asking if any location data had been silently logged. They received confirmation that the device had not pinged the Iridium satellite network since 3:51 p.m. on September 25th, the day he entered the park. That time discrepancy drew attention. If his device stopped transmitting less than 7 hours into his hike, something had gone wrong early. At sunrise on October 3rd, a ranger team conducted a visual sweep of the drop-off zone near the Toklat River. No tracks, no visible camp. A fixed-wing aircraft was dispatched for an aerial grid scan of Units 34 and 36. The terrain was open, low scrub, exposed ridges, and alpine drainage paths. Nothing unusual appeared. It wasn't until the afternoon of October 4th that something surfaced. A pair of seasonal biologists conducting caribou observation in Unit 35 reported finding a solo campsite near a bend in the western glacial runoff, roughly 5.2 miles northeast of Nathaniel's original route, near 63.5489 degrees N, 149.8537 degrees WW. They described the camp as pristine, tent erected, cooking gear placed carefully on a cleared rock. Bear canister unopened, trekking poles leaned against a rock, no trash, no disturbance. They assumed the hiker was nearby, but when rangers arrived, it was clear the site had been abandoned. Inside the tent, a down sleeping bag lay unzipped. A folded fleece sat like a pillow. One of Nathaniel's notebooks was tucked into the corner of the tent, pressed flat against the floor. It held route sketches and plant observations, notes about moss growth, wind patterns, and caribou droppings. The last entry was dated September 26th, just 2 days after he entered the park. There were no signs of damage, no evidence of a struggle, no blood, no wildlife intrusion, and, put critically, no footprints leading Tantonkahin away. Only shallow scuff marks near the tent flap, too wind-worn to interpret. The InReach Mini was missing, so was his phone. His pack was zipped and upright, rain cover off but not deployed. His insulated jacket was draped over a large rock, dry. Rangers noted that it appeared intentionally placed, not discarded or blown there. That night, the search upgraded to Phase 2, coordinated foot patrols, K9 teams, and aerial infrared sweeps. On October 5th, search dogs were flown in from Anchorage. 2 dogs picked up a weak scent northeast of the campsite toward a narrow ridge leading to Cathedral Bluffs. But by dusk, the trail ended on exposed stone. Wind conditions had shifted. Snow began to fall lightly. By October 6th, over 30 personnel were involved in the operation, including National Park Rangers, local volunteers, and a helicopter team with thermal imaging. They followed elevation lines, retraced potential routes, scanned drainage areas, and even checked crevasses in nearby rock fields. Still, nothing. A set of prints was found 2 miles north of the site, but confirmed not to match Nathaniel's tread pattern. Another hiker had passed through days earlier. No gear, no signs of distress, no discarded items. On October 8th, Carter's vehicle was towed for forensic review. His digital maps and printed copies were intact. Fuel was full, no signs of tampering. A charging cord still plugged into the center console. One curious note: his backup power bank was missing from the vehicle inventory list. A second older model was found inside the pack at camp, drained and unused. By October 10th, the case escalated to Phase 3, presumed missing under abnormal circumstances. Media coverage began to pick up. Leah flew to Alaska and was taken to the campsite under supervision. She confirmed the gear as his. She broke down when shown the notebook. "He always dated everything," she said. "It's like he just stopped." She stayed in the park for 6 more days, posting flyers and organizing a digital outreach campaign under the tag, "Find Nathaniel." But the area had already frozen over. Visibility declined. Funding for continued aerial searches was running out. By October 16th, active search operations were suspended, and a single unanswered question remained. Why had Nathaniel gone off his planned route? He wasn't careless. He didn't improvise. If he had changed direction, there must have been a reason. But if so, he took that reason with him. The full-scale search for Nathaniel Carter officially began on October 5th, 2023, and for the next 11 days, it became one of the most extensive and technically complex search efforts in Denali National Park in over a decade. The park's search and rescue team initiated a multi-pronged strategy. Ground teams, K-9 units, aerial reconnaissance, and data forensics. The operation zone covered over 24 square miles, centered around the discovered campsite and extending northeast toward Cathedral Mountain and the Polychrome Glaciers. Search logistics were overseen by Incident Commander Jeff Masters, a 22-year NPS veteran. He coordinated with Alaska State Troopers, the Air National Guard, and Civil Air Patrol. Each team operated with GPS tracking, logging every sweep to prevent overlap. Daylight was shrinking. By mid-October, usable search windows shrank to 9 to 10 hours per day. Temperatures ranged from 28 degrees to 42 degrees, with wind chills cutting visibility and drone operation times. K-9 units began with promising momentum. On October 6th, 2 scent dogs from the Alaska Search Dogs Association independently alerted along a narrow ridge path 1.3 miles northeast of the tent. The location was rocky, uneven terrain with little soil, no footprints, no items. But both dogs fixated on the same area near a rock outcrop shaped like a slanted spire. A ranger team rappelled down its eastern slope, but found only loose gravel, animal scat, and a few old feathers, likely from a raven. Still, the canine reaction was strong enough that the location was designated Zone Red. It was searched 3 more times. No trace of Nathaniel. On October 7th, thermal imaging from a helicopter picked up a heat signature at 63.556 degree N, 149.858 degree U, less than half a mile from the campsite. Rangers landed and found the source, a collapsed patch of tundra over a geothermal vent. Natural, harmless, but not human. A drone equipped with flare was flown in from Anchorage and programmed with Carter's known height and gear signature. It scanned a 4-mile radius in overlapping spirals. Each flight took 23 minutes before battery swap. Over 40 hours of footage were reviewed manually. Nothing. Meanwhile, a team reviewed satellite data from commercial providers. On September 27th, 2 days after Nathaniel entered the park, one satellite image showed what may have been a small reflective object near the base of Cathedral Mountain. Too blurry to confirm. Weather on October 8th made it impossible to replicate the image. Forensics turned to technology. Garmin's Emergency Response Division confirmed that the InReach Mini had stopped transmitting 6 hours and 37 minutes after Carter's initial check-in. It had no low battery signal, no emergency SOS trigger, and no damage alert. Their analysis suggested one of 2 possibilities. The device was manually shut off, or signal access was intentionally blocked. Neither aligned with Nathaniel's behavior. AT&T released metadata from his phone. The last tower ping occurred 16 miles south of the Talcott entrance at 7:02 a.m. on the day he entered the park. No other network activity since. A request was made for Google account location logs, but access was restricted. Nathaniel had disabled location history 6 months earlier, citing privacy concerns. Attention shifted to recovered personal items. His notebook, the one found inside the tent, had a strange anomaly. Between September 25th and 26th, the handwriting changed subtly, slightly larger, shakier, as if written in wind or on unstable footing. One entry caught attention. Heard something again, not wind. 4 intervals, same pitch, pause between, not echo. Rangers weren't sure what to make of it. Leah confirmed it was his handwriting. He'd used the term intervals before to describe bird calls, but the phrasing was off, clipped, clinical. It was the last note he wrote. The second notebook was missing. So was the solar charger, his main source of power. Investigators began tracing psychological angles. A criminal profiler from the FBI's Anchorage field office was brought in. They reviewed his email history, therapy records, with family permission, and any evidence of instability. There was none. Nathaniel had no known mental health issues, no diagnosed conditions, no recent emotional distress. He had withdrawn some cash before the trip, $240, found still in his pack, no messages indicating departure or despair, no behavioral flags. So the team pivoted. What if someone else had been out there? The park has no formal surveillance network, no trail cameras in Unit 34. But investigators checked the entry permits issued between September 20th and October 1st. Only 6 parties had registered in Units 33-36. None matched Carter's timeline. All hikers were accounted for. Then came the report from a backcountry photographer. On October 12th, a woman named Allison Pike submitted a statement to park authorities. She'd been photographing grizzlies along the Toklat River on September 26th and saw, in her words, a flash of blue moving fast along a slope above the eastern bluff. She assumed it was a ranger. But after seeing the missing person flyer, she believed it might have been Carter. The problem? He wasn't supposed to be near that slope. The angle would have required him to detour nearly 3.5 miles from his planned route, through uneven scree and drainage cuts. Still, rangers took it seriously. They flew over the bluff 3 times. No results. As days passed, the tone shifted. The terrain had hardened. Night temperatures dropped below freezing. Snow flurries began on the 14th. Active search resources were stretched thin. On October 16th, the operation formally transitioned to limited monitoring. Rangers posted weather-resistant signs at key junctions. Missing hiker, Nathaniel Carter. If you see anything, do not disturb. Contact NPS immediately. Leah refused to stop. She remained in Alaska until October 21st, meeting with off-grid hikers, dog mushers, bush pilots. She printed QR-coded flyers with GPS overlays and handed them out at lodges and general stores in Healy and Cantwell. She started a GoFundMe to hire private aerial scans. In total, she raised $38,000 in 2 weeks. A third-party team conducted drone mapping over 2 possible detour routes. No new signs, no anomalies. She offered a $10,000 reward for any verifiable lead. None came. Weeks passed, then months, and in that entire time, not a single trace of Nathaniel Carter was ever found. No gear, no clothing, no body, no signal. Only an untouched camp, a cut-off transmission, and a single note about an unidentified sound. A disappearance so clean, so surgically precise, that some investigators began to quietly question whether they were looking in the right direction at all. From the beginning, investigators entertained 3 major categories of theories in the disappearance of Nathaniel Carter: environmental accident, human intervention, and unexplained anomaly. Each carried plausible threads, but none fully accounted for the facts. The first and most straightforward theory: a natural accident. Denali's backcountry, even in stable weather, remains one of the most treacherous landscapes in North America. Loose shale, sudden drop-offs, glacial runoff, and hidden fissures create constant hazards. It's not unusual for solo hikers to fall and remain undiscovered for months or years. In 2015, a climber fell into a crevasse near Muldrow Glacier and wasn't recovered until spring thaw. The search teams considered this possibility early. But the issue wasn't whether an accident could have occurred. It was that no sign of one did. His gear was untouched, no distress signal, no dragging marks, torn clothing, snapped branches, or disturbed terrain. Infrared didn't pick up body heat in the critical 72-hour window. Drones captured no signs of impact zones or blood. Rangers swept every logical fall path. Nothing. Most troubling, if he'd slipped or become injured nearby, why didn't he activate his Garmin's SOS, which leads to the second theory: human involvement. Though rare, crimes have occurred in Denali. In 1999, a hiker was robbed and left unconscious by a stranger posing as a researcher. In 2006, a woman reported being followed for 2 days by a man who never registered for backcountry access. In both cases, perpetrators vanished before identification. But in Nathaniel's case, there was no evidence of a second person. Surveillance showed no unknown vehicles near the entry gate or parking area. Permit logs were clean. Rangers checked regional gas station footage and reviewed airstrip flight plans from nearby Kantishna and Healy. No anomalies. Still, the theory lingered, especially after Leah posted the reward. An anonymous tip arrived via email 2 weeks later, claiming Nathaniel had been seen with another man wearing camo gear and a black pack near Thoroughfare River. The message was routed through a VPN and never traced. Rangers cross-referenced the description with all registered visitors in that time frame. No match. They began asking, could someone have encountered him, followed him, and deliberately silenced his signal? But again, no proof, no tracks, no stolen gear, no motive. The third category of theory, and the most controversial, centered on psychological breakdown or voluntary disappearance. Could Nathaniel have intentionally vanished? Friends and family rejected this outright. He wasn't the type. No financial issues, no legal troubles, no cryptic messages. He'd paid rent through December. He'd promised his niece he'd visit in November for her birthday. His final communication, a brief moving light tomorrow text, showed no distress, no hint of detachment, and abandoning gear. For a man who once walked 2 miles back uphill to retrieve a single dropped glove, it didn't fit. But forensic psychologist Dr. Evelyn Rojas, consulted by a private investigator hired by Leah, offered a more nuanced view. Individuals with extreme self-reliance often suppress signs of internal decline, she explained. It's not about drama or clues. It's about a mental shift that happens silently, and sometimes suddenly. Yet even she admitted, nothing in his pattern suggests he was preparing for disappearance. If it happened, it wasn't planned. Then came the strange theories. Not the supernatural, though some online forums inevitably went there, but rather the statistically rare, hard to classify events. One suggestion, infrasound. Under certain conditions, wind passing over mountain ranges can produce low-frequency vibrations, infrasound, that disorient, induce panic, or cause auditory hallucinations. It's been observed in Antarctica and the Alps. Some climbers report nausea, anxiety, or even the sensation of being watched. Could Nathaniel have experienced something like that? The note in his journal, 4 intervals, same pitch, not echo, lines up eerily with reports of wind-induced infrasound phenomena. But the park's recorded wind data for that day showed no speeds high enough to generate such frequencies. And Carter, as a seasoned mountaineer, had camped in far harsher conditions. Another angle involved wildlife, specifically wolves. Though attacks are almost unheard of in Alaska, a 2010 case in Chignik Lake involved a solo runner who was killed by a wolf. Yet rangers found no scat, fur, or drag marks near Nathaniel's site, no signs of defensive struggle, no signs of prey activity. Some focused on the missing items, his phone, solar charger, second notebook. Why those? Investigators believe the items were likely in his day pack, taken on a short scouting walk from camp. That's standard practice. Carter often explored in 1-2 mile loops before settling in. But if something happened nearby, why no sign? Why no gear left behind? And why did the inReach stop transmitting within hours of entry? Could it have been a signal-blocking event, a malfunction? Or was it shut off? One expert in GPS disruption, Dr. Felix Meyer, analyzed the satellite data surrounding Denali that week. He found no military exercises, no solar flare activity, no known jamming events. Whatever turned that device off, he said, wasn't environmental. As weeks passed and pressure mounted, the National Park Service released a statement. At this time, no evidence suggests foul play or deliberate disappearance. All leads remain under review. The investigation remains open. Unofficially, opinions varied. Some rangers leaned toward accidental fall, body unrecovered due to terrain. Others quietly mentioned the odd stillness of the camp, the unnatural order of the gear. I've seen panicked camps. I've seen storm-abandoned sites, one ranger said. This wasn't either. This looked paused. And that one sentence remains the thread pulling every theory together. There's no trail away from where Nathaniel Carter vanished. Only questions that circle back to the same still point in the tundra, where everything he left behind waited in perfect silence. The case of Nathaniel Carter might have stayed frozen, one more name on the National Park's unresolved list, if not for a snowmelt. On May 14, 2024, 7 months after the search ended, a seasonal geologist named Theo Lang was conducting runoff measurements near a tributary of the Sanctuary River. The area, 2.3 miles southeast of Carter's abandoned camp, had only recently become accessible after the spring thaw. Lang noticed a cluster of objects half buried in the moss near a sharp bend in the water. At first glance, it looked like weather-blown debris, but upon closer inspection, he found a portable solar charger, a tattered dry bag, and a cracked smartphone face down in the mud. The charger was partially caked in sediment. The dry bag was empty except for a faded paper napkin with scribbled notes, ink blurred beyond recovery. The phone was the most promising item. Lang followed protocol and called the ranger station. Within 2 hours, the items were in the hands of Denali law enforcement and confirmed to belong to Nathaniel Carter. Serial numbers matched gear listed in his inventory. His fingerprints were recovered from both the phone and charger. But what mattered most was inside the phone. Despite water damage, the device powered on in data recovery mode. Forensics teams worked with the manufacturer to retrieve fragments of the internal storage. Most files were corrupted, but one folder, auto-saved videos, contained a 1-minute 12-second clip, time-stamped September 27, 5:42 p.m. It was the only intact video file on the device. The footage was shaky. The sky was overcast, wind pushing against the built-in mic. At first, it showed only low ridgelines and scattered tundra brush. Then, suddenly, Nathaniel spins the phone. The horizon tilts, the image blurs, the final seconds are disorienting. There's no obvious threat, no visible figure. But the audio tells a different story. At exactly 00:48 seconds, there's a sound. Not mechanical, not animal. A human scream, distant but unmistakable, echoing across the ridgeline. Male, sharp, then silence. Nathaniel's breathing changes. The video jolts downward as the phone drops. The recording ends in a smear of sky and grass. What stands out isn't just the scream, but the direction. The phone was facing south when the scream echoed from the northeast, toward the area where his original route had been mapped, toward the place he was supposed to be. Investigators played the clip dozens of times. Audio engineers filtered the frequencies. No animal in the region produces a match. The call wasn't repeated. It was a single cut-off burst, then nothing. It didn't clarify anything, but it shifted the tone. Theories resurfaced. Was Nathaniel responding to someone else's distress? Did he go off route to investigate? Was the scream real or imagined? The clip was never released publicly. Leah was allowed to view it in a controlled setting. She left the room without saying anything. Later, she told a reporter, "He heard something. That much is clear, and whatever it was, it changed what he was doing." The location of the phone also raised questions. It wasn't along any of the paths he'd planned. In fact, it was on the far side of a natural ridge wall, one that would have taken serious effort to cross. And the area had already been searched twice during the October operation, which meant either the phone had been missed or moved. A search team returned to the recovery site in June 2024. They brought dogs, aerial drones, and new scanning tools. No trace of Nathaniel, no clothing, no bones, no shelter, no sign he'd ever been there, apart from what he left behind. And that's where it ended. No conclusive answer, no second video, no clue about what led him to that spot, why his gear was left behind, or who, if anyone, screamed that afternoon. But the phone changed the case from missing person to open investigation. Rangers now classify it as unexplained incident involving potential third-party presence. A cautious term, but an honest one. Whatever happened to Nathaniel Carter didn't leave behind a neat narrative, just a single scream echoing through the wind and the ghost of a man turning toward it. As of November 2025, the case of Nathaniel Carter remains open, but inactive. The National Park Service still lists him as a missing person under incident file, hashtag DN 2023-4421. There are no new leads, no suspects, no definitive cause of disappearance, only an internal note appended to the file. potential third-party involvement not ruled out. The recovered phone is held in Anchorage as part of ongoing evidence preservation. The video was analyzed by 3 separate forensic labs, federal, private, and academic, but results were inconclusive. The scream's origin point couldn't be triangulated. Audio distortion from wind and elevation made precise analysis impossible. Voice matching databases produced no results. In the absence of further physical evidence, law enforcement scaled back involvement. The park rangers still respond to tips, of which there have been dozens, but none have yielded anything credible. Hikers report hearing odd sounds, finding discarded items, or spotting distant figures. All have been investigated. None have led anywhere. The FBI closed its brief consult in August 2024, citing lack of jurisdiction and actionable data. Nathaniel Carter is now listed on national missing persons registries. His face appears alongside others who entered the wilderness and never came back. Posters remain at ranger stations in Denali, though some are sun-bleached and peeling. His family hasn't stopped. Leah maintains a website, findnathaniel.org, which hosts a timeline of events, archived media, and scanned pages from his recovered notebook. She still funds drone sweeps once per season, weather permitting. In October 2024, she returned to the park for the 1-year anniversary. She left a laminated letter in a dry tube at the last known campsite, a few words folded carefully into plastic. "We're still looking." Robert and Denise Carter, Nathaniel's parents, have not spoken publicly since a brief appearance on regional news in early 2024. At that time, Denise said, "We just want to know what happened. Even if it's the worst, we want to bring him home." They haven't returned to Alaska since. Most of the world has moved on. News coverage faded. Online discussion threads grew quiet. A handful of wilderness blogs still mention his name, usually in cautionary tales about solo travel. But for those closest to him, time has not made it easier. Because despite the months and seasons passing, the story never changed. A man walked into the wild, prepared, experienced, grounded, and never walked back out. No wreckage, no remains, just an abandoned camp, a final scribbled note, and a scream on the wind. What keeps this case alive is not evidence, but absence. And for his family, that absence is unbearable. There's something uniquely unsettling about stories with no ending, no trail, no cause, no closure. Nathaniel Carter left no manifesto, no dramatic goodbye, no final photo with hidden meaning. He simply walked into a landscape he had studied, respected, and loved, and never came back. Everything else remained: his tent, his notes, his plans, his discipline, all intact. Except for him. We don't know why he turned off his path, or what he heard, or why his satellite beacon, the one thing he never failed to use, went silent within hours of arrival. We don't know who or what screamed across that ridge, or why he dropped his phone instead of recording more. And perhaps most disturbingly, we don't know why no trace of his body, clothing, or gear has ever surfaced in a place where everything else was found. For a man who structured his life around control, documentation, and order, his disappearance feels like an interruption in logic itself, as if something outside that system reached in and pulled him out. But mysteries don't owe us structure. They linger. They echo. They slip through the cracks of what we think is possible. Leah still hopes someone might see something, a photograph, a video, a memory of another hiker passing a lone figure that week. She says, "We don't expect a miracle, just a direction." And maybe that's what this story is about. Not just a man lost in the wild, but the terrifying idea that even the most prepared, the most cautious, the most grounded among us can simply vanish, not due to arrogance, not due to error, but because something broke the pattern. So now we leave you with the question that Nathaniel's family, friends, and those who search for him still ask themselves. If a person can disappear without struggle, in daylight, in open terrain, with gear, experience, and intent, then what really happened out there? And more importantly, what would you have done, standing on that ridge, hearing that scream? Tell us what you think happened to Nathaniel Carter. Because for now, all that remains is the question and the silence.